In today's video, we're going to review 33 companies that in the last week announced dividend increases, 7 companies that announced decreases, and 1 that announced a special dividend. And we're going to start right here with Oak Valley Bancorp, and they are raising their quarterly dividend by 6.7%, giving them a forward yield of 2.63%. Heartland Financial announced an increase in their dividend by 7.1%, giving them a forward yield of 2.62%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 9th with a pay date on February 28th. NRG Energy is raising their dividend by 7.9%, giving them a forward yield of 4.77%. They go ex-dividend on January 31st with a pay date on February 15th. United Bankshares is raising their dividend by 4.8%, giving them a forward yield of 4.69%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 15th. Cross Timbers Royalty Trust is raising their dividend by 108.1%, giving them a forward yield of 14.54%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 14th. San Juan Basin Royalty Trust is increasing their monthly dividend by 16.5%, giving them a forward yield of 12.58%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 14th. Schlumberger is raising their dividend by 42.9%, giving them a forward yield of 1.74%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 7th with a pay date on April 6th. Chesswood Group Limited is raising their dividend by 25%, giving them a forward yield of 5.45%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 15th. RBB Bancorp is raising their dividend by 14.3%, giving them a forward yield of 3.16%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 27th with a pay date on February 10th. CVS Health is raising their dividend to 60.5 cents, giving them a forward yield of 2.76%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 19th with a pay date on February 1st. South Plains Financial is raising their quarterly dividend by 8.3%, giving them a forward yield of 1.9%. They'll go ex-dividend coming up in the next week on January 27th with a pay date on February 13th. Consolidated Edison announced a quarterly dividend increase of 2.5%, giving them a forward yield of 3.5%. This dividend aristocrat is going to go ex-dividend on February 14th with a pay date on March 15th. Banner announced a dividend increase by 9.1%, giving them a forward yield of 3.13%. They'll go ex-dividend coming up on February 1st with a pay date on February 13th. JB Hunt Transport Services is raising their dividend by 5%, giving them a forward yield of just 0.9%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 9th with a pay date on February 24th. JD Bankshares is raising their quarterly dividend by 8%, giving them a forward yield of 3.86%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 26th with a pay date on February 3rd. Graham Holdings is raising their dividend by 4.4%, giving them a forward yield of 1.09%. Ex-dividend is coming up on February 1st with a pay date on February 16th. Plumas Bancorp is raising their dividend by 56.3%, giving them a forward yield of 2.58%. They go ex-dividend on January 31st with a pay date on February 15th. Birchcliff Energy has announced a 900% increase from their prior dividend, giving them a forward yield of 6.73%. They'll go ex-dividend on March 14th with a pay date on March 31st. EnLink Midstream is raising their dividend by 11.1%, giving them a forward yield of 3.9%. Ex-dividend is coming up on January 27th with a pay date on February 13th. Fidelity D&D Bancorp is raising their dividend by 9.1%, giving them a forward yield of 3.09%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 16th with a pay date on March 10th. Lots to talk about here with Fastenal. They've raised their quarterly dividend by 12.9%, moves them to a forward yield of 2.94%, and in the fourth quarter of 2022, they purchased back 7 million shares of its common stock, and they have the authority to purchase up to 6.2 million more shares of their common stock. They're going to go ex-dividend coming up on February 1st with a pay date on March 2nd. Not sure how to pronounce this one. It's either ONEOK or ONEOK, and they're raising their quarterly dividend by 2.1%. They've got a forward yield of 5.56%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 27th with a pay date on February 14th. Metro City Bankshares is raising their dividend by 20%, giving them a forward yield of 3.57%. They'll go ex-dividend on the last day of January on the 31st with a pay date on February 10th. Union Bankshares is raising their dividend by 2.9%, giving them a forward yield of 5.96%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 26th with a pay date on February 2nd. H&R Real Estate Investment Trust is raising their dividend by 9.2%, giving them a forward yield of 3.49%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 15th. First Community is raising their quarterly dividend by 7.7%, giving them a forward yield of 2.6%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 14th. MTY Food Group is raising their dividend by 19%, thus giving them a forward yield of 1.23%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 2nd with a pay date on February 15th. Enterprise Bancorp is raising their dividend by 12.2%, giving them a forward yield of 2.56%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 7th with a pay date on March 1st. Prime Dividend is raising their monthly dividend by 4% with a forward yield of 7.55%. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 10th. Franco-Nevada is raising their dividend by 6.3%, giving them a forward yield of 0.93%. They'll go ex-dividend on March 15th with a pay date on March 30th. Allied Properties Real Estate Investment Trust is raising their dividend by 2.9%. This gives them a forward yield of 4.5%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 30th with a pay date on February 15th. Mercantile Bank is raising their dividend by 3.1%, giving them a forward yield of 3.76%. They'll go ex-dividend on March 2nd with a pay date on March 15th. There are 7 companies this week that announced decreases to their dividends, and the first is Mesa Royalty Trust, and that dividend cut was 14.6%. Next is VOC Energy Trust, and their quarterly dividend was slashed by 37%. Hugoton Royalty Trust announced a dividend decrease by 4.8%. Permianville Royalty Trust decreases their quarterly dividend by 3.4%. We saw a 29.2% decrease in the quarterly dividend from Vernado Realty Trust. A monthly dividend payer, Income Financial Trust, is decreasing that dividend by 2.3%. And finally, for share owners of Summit Bank shares, you're getting a special dividend of 41 cents for each share that you own. Hope this is all helpful information to y'all, so take a look at this video next.